I woke up in a hospital bed after blacking out from internal bleeding, and the doctor told me I had been forcibly impregnated with complications that would change my body forever.
My name is Lucia Vargas. I'm 32 now, and I was in that world for about 3 years, starting when I was 23. I still remember what my days felt like back then. I'd wake up early in our little house in the suburbs of Buenos Aires, the same one I grew up in. The walls were thin and the roof leaked when it rained hard, but it was home. I'd make coffee for my mom first thing, really weak the way she liked it, because her stomach couldn't handle it strong anymore. Then I'd help get my younger sisters ready for school, brushing their hair, making sure they had something to eat, packing their bags. I was the oldest, so that was just my job, you know? During the day, I worked as a waitress at this little cafe near the center. It wasn't fancy, but the tips were okay if you smiled a lot and moved fast. I'd run plates of empanadas and coffee to tables full of office workers on their lunch breaks. My feet would hurt by the end of the shift, but I'd joke with the other girls in the kitchen and try to stay upbeat. After work, I'd head straight to my evening classes. I was studying to be an elementary school teacher. God, I wanted that so bad. I used to picture myself in a classroom with little kids, reading stories, helping them with their letters. It felt like the kind of job where I could actually make things better for the next generation. Money was always tight. After my dad died when I was 15, everything got harder. He was a mechanic, always covered in grease but good with his hands. Mom worked at a small store, but her salary wasn't enough once he was gone. She never complained much, at least not to us kids. She'd just stay up late sometimes, and I'd catch her counting coins at the kitchen table. I started helping more around the house, picking up extra shifts whenever I could. The fear of us ending up on the street never really left me. I'd lie in bed at night and think about how I needed to finish my degree so I could get a real salary and take care of them. My mom and I were close. She was the one person I could talk to about almost anything. We'd sit on the little patio sometimes after the girls went to sleep and just talk about the day. She had these kidney problems that started getting worse around that time. Doctor visits, medicines, it all added up. I remember one night she looked really pale and told me not to worry, that we'd figure it out. But I could see the fear in her eyes. That's when I started picking up more hours, even if it meant I was exhausted all the time. I wasn't some saint or anything. I'd have moments where I'd dream about normal stuff, maybe meeting a nice guy, going dancing with friends on the weekend, or just having enough to buy my sister's new shoes without stressing. But mostly life was this steady grind. Wake up, work, study, come home, help out, sleep a few hours, repeat. There were little bright spots, though, like when one of my sisters would run home from school excited about something she learned, or when I'd ace a test in my pedagogy class. Those moments made me feel like I was moving forward, like all the sacrifice was worth it. Looking back, I guess there were cracks already forming. The tiredness that never went away. The way I'd sometimes snap at my sisters when I was overwhelmed. The constant calculation in my head about whether we could pay the bills that month. But I believed if I just kept pushing, kept working hard, things would get better. I really thought I could hold everything together. I had no idea how quickly it could all slip away. Things started getting heavier, little by little. At first, it was just more tired than usual. I'd finish my waitress shift, my legs aching, and then sit through 3 hours of night classes trying to keep my eyes open. Some nights I'd get home after 10 and my mom would be on the couch looking smaller somehow. Her kidney issues were getting worse. She'd have these bad days where she could barely get out of bed, and I'd have to cover for her at the house on top of everything. The bills started piling up in a way that felt different. Not just the usual tight month, but real worry. There was this one electricity notice that came with a late fee we couldn't pay right away. Then the medicine for Mom went up in price. I remember staring at the receipt from the pharmacy and feeling this knot in my stomach. I picked up extra shifts at the cafe, sometimes double ones on weekends. My sisters would ask why I was never around anymore, and I'd try to smile and say it was temporary. I started missing classes. Not a lot at first, just one here and there when Mom had a doctor's appointment, or when I was too wiped out. My grades slipped a little. My favorite professor pulled me aside one evening and said I had potential, but I needed to show up more consistently. That stung. I wanted to tell her everything, but what was I going to say? That we were drowning? Instead, I just nodded and promised to do better. At home, the arguments got more frequent. Not big blowouts, just this constant low-level tension. Mom would feel guilty about not working as much and snap at me over small stuff, like how I folded the laundry. I'd snap back because I was exhausted and scared. Then we'd both feel bad and try to pretend it didn't happen. My little sisters picked up on it. They'd get quiet when we raised our voices, and that broke my heart more than anything. There was this night I came home really late after covering someone's shift. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Mom was sitting there with a stack of papers, her hand shaking a little. She told me the doctor said she needed surgery soon, or things could get dangerous. I sat down across from her and we just looked at each other. Neither of us had the words. I told her I'd figure it out, that I'd work more, borrow money, whatever it took. But inside, I was panicking. We were already behind on rent. My savings, if you could even call them that, were basically nothing. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped dreaming out loud about teaching. It felt selfish to talk about my future when the present was falling apart. I'd lie in bed replaying the day, calculating numbers in my head over and over. How much more could I work without collapsing? What if Mom got really sick? What would happen to the girls? It wasn't like everything was terrible every single day. There were still good moments, my sister getting a good grade, Mom having a decent day where she could cook again. But those moments started feeling further apart. The weight was building, and I could feel myself getting smaller under it. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch, that if I pushed harder, everything would turn around. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The hospital bill for Mom's tests came in, and it felt like a punch to the chest. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the number until the paper started shaking in my hands. I tried everything I could think of. I went to the bank for a loan, but they took one look at our situation and said no. I asked my aunt for help, but she had her own problems. I even thought about dropping out of school to work full-time, but that would mean giving up on the one thing that was supposed to get us out of this mess long-term. Every night I'd lie there running the numbers again and again. The surgery was expensive. The medicines after would be expensive. Rent was due. Food for 4 people. I started skipping meals so the girls could eat better. Mom's face looked thinner every week. She tried to hide how much pain she was in, but I could see it. The fear that something would happen to her and I'd be left alone with my sisters. That fear kept me up more than anything. Then one afternoon at the cafe, this regular customer, a woman who worked in fashion or something, mentioned she knew a modeling agency that helped girls with high-end companionship work. She said it paid really well, mostly just dinners and events with foreign businessmen. No touching, just being charming and smiling. I laughed it off at first and told her I wasn't that type of girl. But the number she casually mentioned for one weekend? It was more than I made in 2 months. I pushed the thought away hard. For days, I pretended I didn't hear it. I went back to my shifts, smiled at customers, came home exhausted. But the bill was still there. Mom had another bad episode and ended up in the emergency room overnight. When I saw her in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines, something inside me cracked wider. I kept thinking, what kind of daughter am I if I let her suffer when there's a way to fix this? I told myself it wasn't real escort work. It was accompaniment. Just talking, having dinner, maybe going to nice places. I could do a few weekends, pay for the surgery, get us caught up, and then go right back to my normal life. No one would ever have to know. It would be my secret, my sacrifice. I convinced myself it was temporary, just a few months max. I'd be careful. I'd stay in control. I called the number the woman gave me. The lady on the phone was nice, professional. She explained it again. Elegant dinners, conversation, making clients feel comfortable. Good money up front. I asked a million questions. She answered everything calmly. Still, I hung up and didn't call back for 2 more days. But Mom's doctor called with a date for the surgery. We had to pay a big chunk soon, or they'd move her down the list. I remember standing in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, heart pounding. I thought about my sisters sleeping in the next room. I thought about my dad and how he'd expect me to take care of them. I dialed the number again. When the woman asked if I was ready to meet and discuss the details, I took a deep breath and said, yes. The agency lady texted me an address in a nicer part of the city. I took the bus and then walked the last few blocks because I didn't want anyone from the neighborhood seeing me get out of a cab. The building looked like a regular apartment complex, nothing flashy. Clean lobby, quiet elevator. I remember the floor number stuck in my head the whole ride up. A woman in a dark blazer met me at the door. She smiled like she already knew me and asked me to sit on a beige couch while she went over a few things. She said the client was a foreign businessman in town for meetings. Just dinner, conversation, maybe a drink or two. Be polite, smile, listen more than talk. She handed me a small envelope with some cash for a taxi later and told me the rest would come after. I nodded and tried not to look as nervous as I felt. The client was already in the living room when she walked me in. Older guy, maybe late 40s, gray at the temples, nice suit, but the jacket was off. He stood up and shook my hand. His English had an accent I couldn't place. He said my name the way the agency had written it and asked if I wanted wine. I said yes, just to have something to do with my hands. We sat at a small table by the window. The city lights were out there, but the room felt closed in. He asked about my studies, about teaching, about Buenos Aires. I answered in short sentences. There were long silences where he just looked at me and I looked at my glass. He told a story about a trip to Europe that I only half followed. At some point, he moved closer on the couch. The agency woman had already left. I don't remember the exact moment things shifted. 1 minute we were still talking, the next the conversation stopped and the room felt different. I kept my eyes on a painting on the wall and counted the seconds. When it was over, he stood up, straightened his shirt, and went into the bathroom. I sat there for a minute, then stood and put my shoes back on. He came out, handed me an envelope thicker than the first one, and said something polite about seeing me again. I said thank you and walked to the door. The hallway outside smelled like cleaning product. In the elevator, I checked the money quickly, more than I made in a month at the cafe. Outside, I got into a taxi and gave the driver an address a few blocks from my real one. The whole ride, I stared at the window and felt the envelope in my bag. My hands were steady. My stomach wasn't. When I got out and started walking the last stretch home, something in my chest felt heavier than it had that morning. I knew the money would help. I also knew I wasn't the same person who had walked into that building a few hours earlier. The money hit my account fast after that first night. I paid the hospital deposit the next morning. Mom's surgery got scheduled. For the first time in years, I walked into the pharmacy and bought her medicine without counting every peso. I told my family I got a better waitressing gig with foreigners. They believed me. Then the agency started calling more. At first, it was once or twice a week. A dinner here, an event there. The clients were mostly older guys in suits who wanted someone to listen while they talked about their deals. One guy took me to this rooftop restaurant where the waiter knew him by name. I sat there in a dress they'd lent me, eating food that cost more than my old weekly salary, and I kept thinking, I can't believe this is real. I bought my sister's new school shoes and backpacks. I paid 3 months of rent in advance. Mom started looking better after the surgery, and that made everything feel worth it. I even got my own small apartment closer to the city center so I could work late without questions. It had a real shower and a balcony. I'd stand out there at night sometimes just staring at the lights. The travel started after a couple months. A quick flight to Cordoba for a business trip. Business class. I'd never flown like that before. The client bought me a watch as a thank you. Another guy in a different city took me to a private party where everyone spoke English and laughed too loud. I overheard conversations about contracts and bribes like it was normal small talk. I smiled and nodded and tried not to look shocked. There were strange requests, too. One client just wanted me to sit with him in his hotel suite and watch old movies while he drank. He didn't even touch me. Paid full rate. Another asked me to wear a specific color and talk about my childhood for hours. It felt weird, but the money kept coming. I learned the rules fast. Never ask too many questions, never say no right away, always look happy to be there. My old life started fading. I missed classes more often. The cafe called when I didn't show up for shifts, but I didn't care. I had nicer clothes now, better makeup. My sisters thought I was doing great. Mom was recovering. I told myself this was temporary, that I was almost done. But weeks turned into months. I started recognizing other girls at hotels. We'd give each other small nods in the lobby. The luxury started feeling normal. The envelopes of cash, the late-night car rides, the way powerful men would casually tell you things they probably shouldn't. One night in a penthouse suite, I caught myself laughing at a joke I didn't even find funny, and for a second I didn't recognize my own voice. I was still sending money home. I was still telling myself it was just for a little longer. But the two lives weren't separate anymore. This had quietly become my real life. And the scariest part? Part of me didn't want it to stop. The first year went by faster than I expected. At the beginning, I still tried to keep some kind of schedule, but it didn't last. I'd sleep until 2 or 3 in the afternoon, then get ready for whatever the agency had lined up that night. My sisters started school without me there for the first day. I sent them new uniforms and told Mom I had training for the tourism job. The lies got easier every time I said them. Clients changed over time. Some were okay. There was this quiet German guy who just wanted company while he ate steak and talked about his divorce. He tipped well and never pushed. But others tested the boundaries. One regular from Brazil would book me for whole weekends and then get annoyed if I checked my phone. He'd say things like, "You're here for me tonight, right?" With that smile that wasn't really a smile. I learned to put the phone away and laugh at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. I got good at reading people fast. Walking into a hotel room, I could tell in the first 30 seconds what kind of night it was going to be. Some guys wanted to talk politics or business. Others wanted me to act impressed by their watch or their car. I started carrying a small bag with different outfits, chargers, mints, painkillers. Just in case. The secrets piled up. I missed my youngest sister's birthday party because I was in Mendoza for 2 days. I told the family I had food poisoning. Christmas that year, I showed up late with expensive gifts and pretended I was exhausted from work. Mom looked at me funny a couple times, but never asked directly. I hated how relieved I felt when she let it go. My old friends stopped calling. I canceled plans so many times they just gave up. One night I ran into a girl I used to study with at a cafe. She asked how teaching school was going. I smiled and said great, even though I hadn't been to class in months. After she left, I sat in the bathroom for 10 minutes, just staring at the mirror. The nights started blending together. I'd wake up in different hotels, check the time, delete the messages from the agency, and take a taxi home. I learned which hotels had good back exits. I learned to count the cash in the bathroom before I left. Some mornings I'd come home with my makeup still on and fall asleep in my clothes. The apartment I was so proud of started looking messy. Clothes everywhere, empty water bottles, half-packed bags. There were nights that stuck with me for no big reason. One client in his 60s wanted me to read poetry out loud to him while he closed his eyes. Another guy got mad when I couldn't remember the fake story I'd told him last time about where I grew up. He didn't yell, but the way he looked at me made my stomach drop. I fixed it quick and smiled bigger. I told myself it was fine. I stopped feeling surprised by things. The first time a client casually mentioned his wife and kids while his hand was on my leg, I felt sick. 6 months later, it barely registered. I'd just nod and change the subject. Expensive dinners stopped feeling special. Flying business class felt normal. The luxury started to look the same after a while. My body started showing the wear. I'd get these headaches that lasted days. Sometimes I'd throw up before a booking and still go anyway because the money was already promised. The agency would call and I'd answer on autopilot. "Yes, I'm available. What time?" I almost forgot what normal days felt like. I'd see families in restaurants on Sunday afternoons and feel this weird distance, like I was watching them through glass. My sisters grew up while I was gone. Mom got stronger, but I missed the slow recovery. I was sending money every week, though, so I told myself it balanced out. The worst part was how automatic everything became. Checking hotel room exits without thinking. Memorizing new fake names and backgrounds. Smiling when I wanted to leave. Deleting everything from my phone before I walked in the door at home. I stopped reacting to the little things that used to shock me. A client being rude, another being too familiar, another treating me like furniture. It all just rolled off. One random Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, I came home after a long weekend trip, dropped my bag by the door, and looked around my apartment. The plants were dead. The fridge was almost empty except for water and takeout containers. I sat on the couch in the same dress I'd worn on the flight back and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a full conversation with someone that wasn't paid for. I wasn't scared anymore. That was the scariest part. I had accepted it. This was just my life now. It was supposed to be a regular 2-day trip to Rosario. The agency booked me with a client they called important, some businessman with connections. They took my passport for safety, like they always did on out-of-town jobs. I didn't argue. By then it felt normal. The hotel was nicer than usual. He was polite at first, ordered dinner, talked about his work. But something felt off from the start. He kept checking his phone and smiling at messages I couldn't see. When I asked about the schedule for the next day, he brushed it off and said we'd figure it out later. I remember looking at the door and noticing the chain was already on. Things turned fast that night. He got angry over something small. I don't even remember what. The next hours are hard to put in order. I tried to leave once. Someone was waiting in the hallway and brought me back. After that, there were more men in the room. I stopped counting. I stopped talking. I just focused on the ceiling and tried to stay quiet so it would end sooner. By the third or fourth day, I was barely eating. My body hurt in ways that didn't make sense. I started bleeding and told them I needed a doctor. They laughed and said I was fine, that I was overreacting. I kept working because they said the debt was growing and my family would pay if I didn't. I believed them. I always did. On what I think was the 6th day, I stood up to go to the bathroom and the floor tilted. Everything went gray. I woke up in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and a nurse asking me questions I couldn't answer right away. My passport was gone. My phone was gone. The agency never showed up. The doctor came in the next morning. He was young and looked tired. He spoke carefully, like he was choosing every word. He said I had internal bleeding and serious damage. Then he told me I was pregnant. He said the pregnancy was already complicated because of the injuries and the infection I had. He asked if I knew who the father was. I just stared at the wall. I stayed in that bed for 2 more days while they ran tests. The outside world kept moving. Nurses changed shifts. People walked past the door talking about normal things. No one from the agency called. No one came for me. When the doctor asked if I wanted to report what happened, I said yes, for the first time in years. I didn't even think about the threats or the debt or what they might do to my family. I just knew I couldn't go back. That hospital room was the end of every lie I'd been telling myself. After the hospital, I told the doctor everything I could remember. A young social worker named Carla showed up the next day. She was maybe 28, calm in a way that made me trust her a little. She helped me file the police report even though I was shaking the whole time. The agency had my passport, so getting that back took weeks of paperwork and fear. I kept expecting someone to show up at the hospital. They never did, but I still jumped every time the door opened. Leaving wasn't one clean moment. I tried twice before it stuck. The first time I went back to the apartment for my things and got a call from an agency number threatening to tell my family what I'd been doing. I hung up and stayed inside for 3 days. The second time, I actually packed a bag and made it to the bus station before I talked myself out of it. The debt, the shame, the way my body felt like it belonged to other people, it all pulled me back. Carla got me into a shelter for a few months. That's where I started to break down for real. Nightmares every night. Panic attacks in the shower. I'd wake up convinced someone was in the room. The other women there understood without me having to explain much. We'd sit in the common area drinking bad coffee and trading small survival tips like how to breathe through the flashbacks. Coming home was harder. Mom cried when I finally told her pieces of the truth. Not everything, but enough. My sisters were older by then, and they looked at me different. I moved back in with them because I couldn't afford anything else. The chronic pain started right away. My back, my stomach, constant reminders. The doctors said the infection and the injuries left permanent damage. They also told me I wouldn't be able to have kids. I nodded like it was just another fact, but inside it felt like the last door closing. I tried regular jobs. Waitressing again, but my body couldn't handle the hours. Retail was worse. Too many people, too much noise. I started sewing at home. Masks at first during the pandemic, then simple clothes people ordered online. It doesn't pay much, but I can work from my room when the pain isn't too bad. I almost never leave the house now. Crowds make me anxious. Men, even ones just walking past, make my heart race. I keep the doors locked and check them twice. Some days are okay. I sit with my mom in the kitchen and we talk about normal things. My sisters' lives, what to cook for dinner. Other days the guilt hits so hard I can't get out of bed. I still feel like I failed them even though I paid for Mom's surgery. I sold myself to save my family, and in the end I destroyed myself and still didn't save anyone. I don't forgive the businessman or the agency. I probably never will. The anger is quieter now, but it's always there. Therapy helps some. The support group helps more. I'm learning, slowly, how to be around people again without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Trust is still hard. I flinch when someone touches me, even family. I'm 32. I live with my mom and sisters in the same house I grew up in. I sew orders during the day, watch the street from the window, and try to keep the nightmares from spilling into the daylight. Some wounds heal, a lot of them don't. If you're listening to this, and you're in something that feels impossible to leave, just know it's okay if it takes everything you have. I'm still here, still breathing, still figuring out who I am when no one is paying me to smile. That's all I've got right now, and for today, it's enough.